How do you look at this whole Mahakumbh?
Have really beaten at least my personal expectations. You cannot underestimate the power of a platform like this. Ultimately, you cannot depend only on foreign savings. And China has got like 8 to 10,000 local funds. India's got like 120, maybe 150. I think the Mahakumbh is an excellent platform to showcase the number of good cases and good examples.
Is it realistic to think of becoming a unicorn?
I think it's just a buzzword that's got created, and being a unicorn cannot be an end goal. I look at so many business models in my new role at Sorin, and I tell you, I find half of them not well thought through. Startup is one thing, but scaling up is even more critical.
And which is very tough.
Yeah, which is very tough. You're going to have lots and lots of lows, not only highs.
So welcome Sanjay. It is StartupMahakumbh 2024, as it sounds grand at the beginning of the year. How do you look at this whole Mahakumbh? You know, the whole term itself comes like a grand Mela kind of setup for startups. What are you finding?
Yeah, I'm sure you heard from a lot of people. What I can add is that it has definitely really beaten at least my personal expectations. Just the energy is infectious. The pavilions and booths are overbooked, overcrowded. Yes. We have delegates on wait list. And I think it goes to show that, you know, when so many stakeholders come together to organize something like this, yeah, there are always some knick-knack problems in the beginning, but the power of the relevance of the platform comes to the fore. So if you just cut everything else out, entrepreneurs, founders, incubators, innovators, people from different districts, states, universities, they see that, hey, coming onto one platform is very powerful because they can really connect the dots in the future. You know, exchange a few cards, get to know a few policymakers, get to know a few mentors, learn from the success and failures of other entrepreneurs. I mean, you cannot underestimate the power of a platform like this. I think it's off to a brilliant start.
It's more like an outreach platform because this is the way where you, generally in India, we outreach for digital medium much faster.
No, outreach is when you're reaching out to like get something. This is like crowding in platform. You know, you're crowding in all the stakeholders. So it's a crowding in platform if you ask me. And after that, when you make your connects, then you can do an outreach as the months go along from here.
Understanding from you on the investment side, a major part or role in the startup world or ecosystem is of investment. We see a boom in this whole understanding of startup. We are starting up. There's so many startup goals in the country. Unicorns have come in. Is it because now the capital is available, the fund is there? Is one reason. I think we've been speaking to so many people. They said earlier there was no capital. Business to pehle bhi hota tha. Everybody's an entrepreneur then, but today the capital availability is higher, the risk-taking ability is higher, and the ideas are going to implementation level. What, according to you, has got the investment coming in?
So look, firstly, startups and young companies need a different kind of risk capital. Okay. Risk capital in India is growing. It's nowhere near what other countries have. So I think you should not compare with the past. I think we're on a journey and risk capital is increasing. So risk capital is the one that seeds companies, puts money in Series A, Series B, and growth rounds. And then ultimately they get listed in public markets or whatever. So just from a macro perspective, okay, you know, India's per capita GDP, $2,500 range, financial savings or household savings in the range of 24%, financial savings even lower than that. It's a growing country and it's a country that's developing, and hopefully, you know, Viksit Bharat dream can be absolutely achieved by 2047. So when risk capital becomes available, when people have the ability to put money to work in the real sector, startups and seeding them is one of the real sectors. Okay. So I think the way India is finding its journey, and you have to credit the government, is that they've made access to funding by doing the fund of funds. SIDBI is doing an excellent catalytic role. That's how this thing is now picking up pace. So that's number two. Number three, high net worth families, unicorn founders, people who made money out of IPOs, big family offices are now coming in and saying, I'm happy to allocate 5-10% of risk capital to early stage. So that's another source. And I think the final source will be, besides household savings, they also come in through mutual funds, insurance, and pension.
Yes.
Pension and insurance will need some policy changes by the government in due course, but mutual funds and fund of funds are coming up. because every individual, like if you want to put like 10 lakhs to work, you wouldn't know where to go.
Yes.
So you have to go to a kind of a fund of funds. Who knows which entrepreneur to put with? So I think it's an evolution. It's definitely on the increase, but also it's linked to a macro question of what are the savings in the country, and the high end of them are obviously putting more money to work. And the final thing is that, ultimately, you cannot depend only on foreign savings. And I think you're referring to local savings. Foreign savings is what comes through the big global firms. But India needs to develop more local fund managers with local funds, local savings. And China has got like 8 to 10,000 local funds. India's got like 120, maybe 150. So we have a long way to go. A little bit what we're doing at Sorin is that. Is a local fund manager trained there, put up a local fund, brought in local savings.
What do you think, Sanjay, has deterred us from why this gap had come in for us not getting into the local fund accumulation as yet to support the entrepreneurs rather than we have been dependent on the global funds for long now?
I think high net worth families, family offices were not focused on the early stage early.
Okay.
There were lots of people, individuals, like you see InfoEdge and others, who were backing early stage companies through an organized setup. And there were enough angel investors. But for it to become truly institutionalized, sizable, get a branding of its own, it takes time. So it takes time.
They're waiting for others to show them the way.
In a way, but I think success stories also help, right? You have some fantastic success stories like Zomato and others, and that's when it propels, and then the virtuous cycle starts.
What are the risks involved, Sanjay, when we are going to the local fund accumulation and supporting the seed funding, angel funding through our local funds? What are the risks that we are taking coming from a country that we are a developing country, right? So we are working on that path to get there. We can't compare ourselves every day with the global macro economies. So is this realistic for us to go and catch that trend and fall in line?
I think no country has developed without ample risk capital, both in the equity markets and debt markets. Okay. So it has to happen. Governments can help to an extent. It's not like governments have surpluses to be able to put money to this. So even the fact that they've allocated money to the fund of funds, and now they're talking about deep tech fund of funds towards R&D, these are great moves. But ultimately, you have to crowd in the local savings and the private savings. And the foreigners will also follow.
True.
Foreigners will not just come if locals don't do it.
Yes.
So that's the crowding in that's happening. And I think the Mahakumbh is an excellent platform to showcase the number of good cases and good examples. And hopefully this leads to a really, virtuous cycle.
Coming on the other side of the table about the startup doers, what is that you have encountered through the Mahakumbh, having interacted with few of the young startups or unicorns or maybe incubators to say so particularly, that you thought that these are new learnings that you are taking away from this Mahakumbh? Very interesting, that has taken you like, wow, people can go this way.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I didn't answer your previous question fully, but I think the biggest thing that I'm finding in speaking to entrepreneurs here is that they're asking me questions. Okay, it's a huge move where they are happy to ask, which in a way is saying, give me advice, or I need some help. I think that's a huge, huge homecoming. And that was a risk I was going to mention earlier. The risk you run in this industry is if founders become arrogant, they know it all attitude, governance is not focused on, then you have a lot of accidents. But the big difference I found here, I met a couple of them yesterday on the toy side, the drone side, full of passion, massive conviction. They have a handle on numbers, facts, figures, and not one of them asked me for funding.
Okay.
That's great. I mean, none of them said, hey, can I exchange card and come for funding? But they're asking things like, sir, what have you learned in some of the last few deals?
They're just intrigued to show you what they've discovered. And
they're asking you for questions and asking that, so when should I become a unicorn? Should I become a unicorn? Should I ever do an IPO? So it's quite interesting.
I want to take it up from here, unicorn. Do you really think this has become an aspirational dream for youngsters? And is it realistic to think of becoming a unicorn? Why is there a need to call yourself a unicorn?
I think it's just a buzzword that's got created. And frankly, I think a lot of people have said it since yesterday. Being a unicorn cannot be an end goal. And actually, we should not just chase that. You've got to build a real business, a sustainable business, a profitable business. And frankly, the valuations will sort of follow.
And the last question I want to take you through is, of course, how are you looking at what are the limitations you saw in the startup doers now? These are the things I also saw as you kind of encouraged with their passion and, enthusiasm. what is that you thought that needs a lot of direction for them, because there's so many youngsters now looking at each other. I have an idea, I can pursue it and do it, but things might go wrong. So is there something you've identified which is not realistically good with the generations going into, especially the Gen Z, we say, too excited about it?
I think it's a difficult question, but I think that they shouldn't become overconfident.
Okay.
Just an idea on paper that happened in the early 2000s. Just an idea on paper, and somebody will come and finance me, and I can make it big. I think understanding the fact that your business model or a product or services that you're thinking about has relevance to the Indian market, the Indian customer, which we know is very price and value conscious. I think that's something they need to focus a bit more before converting a paper into a business. That's the way I encourage them. I look at so many business models in my new role at Sorin, and I tell you, I find half of them not well thought through. Forget about profitability.
Okay.
Just is not going to fit in. I mean, if you're developing a product that only 0.1% of India can afford, it's not the right product for a startup. Okay.
So that education.
Like that, yeah. So
at Sorin Private Fund Investment, what is the sector that you look at, sir, particularly when you go to identify there is where we're going to invest ourselves?
We're doing horizontal, but tech-enabled companies,
okay,
but horizontal. B2B, SaaS, agri, logistics, consulting.
But have you identified the sector or the pattern where the need is more, or where the demand is more, or where the involvement of new startup doers are more? You're finding
We're not doing it that way. The way we are looking at it is quality of founders.
Okay.
Yes, some sectors we like more than the others. Like we like health tech, we like now fintech again.
Fintech.
We like B2B and SaaS. Consumer tech, I think, was a bit too expensive. Now it's coming back. But we look at the quality of founder. And the second thing I'm sort of emphasizing to our team is, there's got to be a relevance for us. So if you're leading Series A, we want to be significant size, 10 to 15%. And the founder should also want us as a funder. It's not just like you're cutting a check. There's got to be relevance. Why Sorin?
So they should also know why they want the fund.
And they have to become choosy. They just can't have anybody in their cap stack, right? So I think we're looking at those kind of dialogues. And if you get a sense in their attitude while you're discussing over the months with them that, hey, I'm doing you a favor, or we make it sound like we're doing you a favor, I think that chemistry is not going to work.
Since your wife is one of the renowned names in the country now, having been on the helm of being a founder, businesswoman and everything, what is that quality that you take out from a founder that is the must in a founder that you identify or relate with?
Well, I can't comment on ICA much as a listed entity, but I think what I find is that
the quality in a founder.
I think that they've got to have the conviction and the passion to dream big. I think scale in India is very critical. I think we talked about that yesterday. Startup is one thing, but scaling up is even more critical.
And which is very tough.
Yeah, which is very tough. So the founders got to have the wherewithal. Like Dipinder said yesterday, you're going to have lots and lots of lows, not only highs. So you've got to have the ability to go through all the downs. So the passion, the conviction to go through that for scaling up is the number one thing, if you ask me. And not to get disappointed, not to get disheartened. They've got to be very, very convinced they want to build out.
And does every founder need to be a visionary? Is that a requirement?
Not necessarily.
Must?
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. They should have a goal, maybe have an idea, think big, dream big, have the passion. But vision and those things can also be brought by mentors and family and friends. So that's not that critical.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for sparing time and of course gracing the StartupMahakumbh 2024. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.